Welcome to your deep dive. We're diving deep into relapse prevention today, and wow, you've clearly been doing some serious research with all these articles and notes.
It's great that you're taking this so seriously. Understanding relapse, it's crucial for anyone dealing with addiction, whether it's themselves or someone they care about.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that really jumped out at me from this article here is how it defines relapse. It's not just about like picking up a drink or a drug again. It goes way deeper than that.
Right, it's not that simple. This article does a great job of explaining the stages of relapse and how it's usually a process, not just a sudden thing.
Okay, so walk me through that. How does it start?
Well, think about it like this. You might not even be consciously thinking about using, but emotionally, things are already shifting, making you more vulnerable.
So that's what they call emotional relapse.
Exactly. And then, bam, mental relapse kicks in. The cravings get more intense. The thoughts start creeping back in.
Okay, wow. That whole chain reaction starting in your mind. It's both fascinating and a little scary, right?
It is scary, and it's
Yeah.
exactly why recognizing those early emotional and mental changes is so crucial. It's about getting back in control before it even comes close to a physical relapse.
So how do you do that? How do you even know when those changes are happening?
That's where understanding your triggers comes in. And you've got a whole bunch of them marked down here.
Mm.
Some of them surprise even me.
Well, everyone's different, right? What sets one person off might not even phase another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there are some common themes, for sure. And your research highlights them really well, like stress is a big one, obviously.
Stress is the worst.
It is, but you went deeper than that. You even noted how different types of stress can have different effects, like relationship stress versus work stress. They can hit in totally different ways.
Yeah, you're right. I never thought about it like that.
And then there are the internal triggers, the ones we often don't even realize are affecting us.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, you highlighted this in one of the articles. Negative self-talk, that feeling of, I can't do this. That can be just as powerful as any external trigger.
That makes a lot of sense. If you don't believe in yourself, it's almost like setting yourself up for failure.
Exactly. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
You even underlined a quote here. The most dangerous trigger is a demoralized mind. Powerful stuff.
Wow, that's heavy. So let's say you're aware of these triggers, both internal and external. What can you actually do to stop them from derailing you?
That's where having a solid relapse prevention plan comes in.
Yeah.
And thankfully, your research has uncovered some very practical strategies.
Okay, good. Because that whole just say no thing never really worked for me. What's a better approach?
It's about having a multi-pronged strategy. Self-care is huge, for example.
Hmm?
Eating well, exercise, getting enough sleep. These things all play a role,
Yeah, I know all that. But sometimes it's hard to actually do it?
right? It's one thing to know it, another to do it. But your research really gets into the why, and I think that's important. It's not just about being healthy in a general sense. It's about building resilience to make those triggers less likely to stick.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
You've got specific techniques highlighted too. Mindfulness meditation, for example. I see you've even jotted down some guided meditations you're trying out.
Hey, gotta stay one step ahead, right? Having practical tools to manage those overwhelming feelings is so important.
And that's the beauty of mindfulness. You can do it anywhere, anytime. You've also got deep breathing exercises marked. Those can be done discreetly if you need to calm down quickly in a tense situation.
I love this idea of having a mental toolkit full of techniques. What else have you got?
Well, this one might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised how often it's overlooked. Avoiding those people, places, and things that are linked to your substance use.
Right, like why tempt fate?
Exactly. Set yourself up for success. Don't hang out in the lion's den, so to speak.
Love that analogy.
And then, of course, there's building that strong support system, friends, family, support groups, therapists. Having people you can reach out to when things get tough is invaluable. You even specifically mention a therapist who specializes in specific therapy approach from the listener's research, clearly. That piqued your interest,
It did. And speaking of therapy, you highlighted that quite a bit in your research.
as you should. Therapy offers that safe space to process emotions, to develop healthy coping mechanisms, and tackle any underlying issues that might be contributing to the addiction. It's also a place to really delve into specific techniques, like CBT, which your research suggests might be helpful.
Well, yeah, CBT. For our listeners who might not know, CBT basically helps you spot those risky situations before they happen so you can come up with healthier ways to respond. It's pretty amazing.
It is. And you know what it reminds me of? Marlot's cognitive behavioral model.
Yeah.
It's another approach to relapse prevention that you found interesting.
Oh, right, right. Tell me more about that.
Well, like CBT, it also emphasizes identifying your personal risk factors, those triggers we talked about. But then it goes a step further. It encourages you to actually map out with your therapist the best ways to react to those high-risk situations. It's like planning ahead for those moments of weakness.
That is genius. Because it's one thing to know your triggers, but it's another thing entirely to know what to do when they pop up. It's like having a battle plan so you're not caught off guard.
Exactly. And you know what? We've covered a lot of ground here. Maybe it's a good time to take a breath and let all this sink in for a moment.
You're right, we have covered a lot. But before we do that, can I just say how incredibly encouraging it is to know that there are so many effective strategies out there for preventing relapse?
Absolutely. It's not a hopeless situation at all. It takes work, for sure, and commitment and having a good plan, but
Mhm.
it's definitely possible.
And having a good support system, which is something we're going to be diving into right after this quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more insights from your research.
Reading through all this research, one thing that really stood out to me was how relapse is framed. It's not this big, shameful failure like you might think, more like, just a bump in the road, a part of the journey. What are your thoughts on that? It's a really important perspective shift. And honestly, it's backed up by the statistics. Did you know the relapse rate for alcohol use disorder can be as high as 90%? You even circled that figure in one of the articles. Clearly, it made an impression.
90%. Wow, that's way more common than I would have thought.
It really highlights that this is something a lot of people experience. It doesn't mean you're weak or that you've somehow failed. It just means, you're human. And it emphasizes how important ongoing support is, something you obviously get based on all this research on support systems.
Makes you realize you're not alone, right? But, okay, let's say it does happen. You hit that bump, you relapse. What then? What happens next?
What you actually highlighted a section in one of the articles about exactly what to do after a relapse.
Oh, yeah. What does it say?
Well, right at the top of the list is seeking support. Reaching out to your therapist, a support group, a trusted friend, talking it through can be incredibly helpful.
It's about getting back on track, not beating yourself up for it.
Exactly. And sometimes, a relapse can even be a learning opportunity.
What do you mean?
Well, you could use it to pinpoint triggers you weren't aware of or to figure out where your coping skills might need a bit more work.
So it's all part of the process, not the end of the world.
Well said.
Hmm.
And another point you highlighted is that relapse doesn't always look the same for everyone.
How so?
For some people, it's a full-blown return to their old habits, but for others, it might be more subtle. Increased cravings, isolating themselves, those early warning signs we talked about.
Which is why being able to spot those subtle signs early on is so important. It's like you're a detective in your own life.
Exactly. And that's where those self-awareness techniques we talked about earlier, they come in handy. Mindfulness, journaling,
Yeah.
even just taking a few minutes each day to check in with yourself emotionally, see how you're really doing, that can make a huge difference.
It's like tuning into your own internal radar, noticing those little shifts in your thoughts, your feelings, your behavior before they become bigger problems.
Exactly. And if you do notice those shifts, don't ignore them. Reach out to your support system, revisit your coping strategies, and remember, even small steps in the right direction are still steps forward.
Small steps, big impact. But we've talked a lot about the psychological and emotional side of relapse prevention. What about the practical hurdles? Like you highlighted how some people avoid getting help in the first place, which obviously makes things a lot tougher.
That's such a crucial point, and there are a lot of reasons why someone might hesitate to reach out, even when they know they really need to. And you seemed really interested in this aspect. You highlighted several key barriers in your notes.
Yeah, like what are some of the biggest roadblocks?
Well, stigma is a big one. There's still so much shame surrounding addiction, so people worry about being judged.
Which is such a shame because addiction is a health issue. It's not a character flaw or a moral feeling.
Exactly. You also flagged the fear of judgment
Mm.
from family, friends, employers,
Yeah.
that fear of losing their job, their relationships, their reputation. It keeps people stuck.
Trapped in that cycle of shame and fear, which obviously makes it that much harder to break free.
You nailed it. And then there are practical barriers, like the cost of treatment or just not knowing where to even start.
Which is why talking about this stuff openly and honestly is so important. Breaking down those barriers, letting people know they're not alone, and that there is help out there. You even dedicated a whole section of your research to local resources.
You're right. I love that you're doing that research. It's so important to know what's available in your own community. And it goes back to that theme of hope and empowerment.
Because recovery is possible, even if it's not always easy, right? It takes work, it takes commitment, it takes support, and sometimes it takes knowing where to find those resources. Which, speaking of support, that feels like a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the incredible power of support systems and how they can be a total game changer in relapse prevention.
We've talked about so many different strategies for preventing relapse, but one thing that keeps coming back to me again and again is the importance of support. Like, you really don't have to do this alone.
It's not just a nice idea. It's absolutely essential. Having those strong support systems can honestly make or break someone's recovery. You'll feel a lot less lost and overwhelmed and much more empowered and capable.
Hmm.
And you clearly get that, judging by how much you've highlighted about support systems in your research.
Yeah, it's true. This one article I was reading broke down all the different types of support, which I thought was super helpful. It's not one size fits all, is it?
Nope, not at all. You've got your family and friends, of course, but then there's professional support too. Therapy support groups,
Mm-hmm.
and then peer support, like what you'd find in a 12-step program. Each one brings something different and important to the table.
It's like you're building a dream team for your recovery, right? You've got your family and friends there for the love and encouragement at the therapist to help you dig into those deeper issues.
And then support groups, they offer that incredible feeling of connection. Like you're with people who truly get it because
Yeah.
they've been there. They've walked a similar path, sharing those experiences, giving advice, just that sense of community. It can be incredibly healing.
Healing. That feels like what relapse prevention is all about, right? Healing from the addiction itself, but also creating a life where you don't feel the need to escape through substances anymore.
It's definitely a journey, not just a destination. There are going to be ups and downs, but what matters is that you keep moving forward.
And having that support system there with you every step of the way. Well, this deep dive has been seriously eye-opening. If there's just one thing you take away from all of this, I hope it's that you are not alone and that recovery, it is within your reach.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, all this research you've done, it's amazing. It's a fantastic foundation. Now it's about taking action.
Ah.
Connect with a professional in your area, check out some support groups, and never forget there's always hope and help available.
That's a perfect note to end on. So to our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into relapse prevention. Keep those conversations going, and we'll see you next time.